Picture a town square in Michigan, 1854. A train has just arrived. On the platform, children are lined up in rows. They have been given new clothes for the occasion. Some are very young, 4, 5 years old. Some are teenagers. They are from New York City. They do not know where they are. They do not know who is coming to get them. The adults arrive. They walk along the rows. They look at the children the way you look at things you might buy. Some point. Some ask questions. Some take a child by the face to check their teeth. By nightfall, most of the children have been taken. The ones nobody chose get back on the train. The train moves to the next town. The process begins again. That is not a description from a dystopian novel. That is a documented account of what happened on October 1st, 1854, in Dowagiac, Michigan, the first stop of the first orphan train in American history. The account was written by the agent who supervised the trip and published by the Children's Aid Society itself. Between 1854 and 1929, an estimated 250,000 children were loaded onto trains in New York City and shipped west. Most of them were not orphans. Many had living parents. Almost none of them were ever systematically tracked. And 5%, representing approximately 12,500 children, either died, disappeared, or were arrested after being placed. Nobody was ever held accountable for those 12,500. New York City in 1854 had a problem it did not know how to solve. The city's population was growing faster than its institutions could contain. Immigration from Ireland and Germany was arriving at the rate of 1,000 people a day. The 5 Points neighborhood, a district so overcrowded, so disease-ridden, so saturated with poverty that it would become the defining image of American urban failure, had an estimated 30,000 homeless children living on its streets. They sold matches. They swept crossings for pennies. They picked pockets. They slept in doorways and under bridges. The police called them street rats. Charles Loring Brace was 27 years old and newly ordained as a minister when he encountered them. He was from Connecticut. He had gone to Yale. He was not a bad man. What he was a man of his time, which meant he held beliefs about poverty, about race, about religion, and about the proper order of society that were common among the Protestant establishment of 1850s America. He believed that poor children, especially the children of Catholic Irish and Italian immigrants, whom he described in his writings as the scum and refuse of ill-formed civilization, were best removed from their environment entirely, not reformed, not supported in place, removed. He believed the solution was the American farm, clean air, Protestant values, hard work. He called it the Emigration Plan. In 1853, he founded the Children's Aid Society. In September 1854, he put the first group of children on a train. Here is what the process actually looked like. Agents from the Children's Aid Society gathered children from the streets, from orphanages, from workhouses, and from the homes of parents who had been told, or had agreed, under desperate circumstances, that their children were going to better lives. Many of the children were not orphans. The Society's own records acknowledge that many of those they deemed orphans were not orphaned at all, and that when families of origin tried to keep their children, they were rebuffed. Poverty was treated as grounds for removal. If you were too poor to adequately care for your children, the Children's Aid Society considered itself entitled to take them. The children were given new clothes, sometimes a Bible. They were told they were going on a train to new homes. They were told the night before. They had no say in the destination. Groups of 10 to 40 children traveled with a single adult agent. The agent had sent flyers ahead to towns along the route. Local committees, typically the town doctor, the clergyman, the newspaper editor, had identified families who wanted children. When the train arrived, the children were displayed on makeshift stages in town halls or church meeting rooms. Adults walked the rows. They inspected. They chose. The agent who supervised the very first trip, E.P. Smith, admitted in his published account that he allowed 2 passengers on a Manhattan riverboat to adopt boys without checking their references. He added a boy he met in an Albany railroad yard to his group, a boy whose claim to orphanhood Smith never bothered to verify. When the remaining 8 children after Michigan were not placed, Smith put them on a train to Iowa City alone, unaccompanied, with instructions to find a reverend at the other end. 8 children, on a train alone, to find a stranger. That was the first trip. The oversight that was supposed to protect the children was, by every documented account, almost entirely theoretical. The Children's Aid Society's stated goal was to visit each placed child once a year. There were a handful of agents monitoring thousands of placements spread across the country. The society tried to keep tabs by sending letters of inquiry to both the children and their foster families. The letters mostly went unanswered. A monitoring system that seriously underreported failure and operated on a prodigious quantity of blind faith. That description comes not from a critic of the program, but from the definitive scholarly history of it, published by the University of Chicago Press. What the system actually produced. A 1910 internal survey by the Children's Aid Society concluded that 87% of placed children had done well, 8% had returned to New York, 5% had died, disappeared, or been arrested. The society called this a success. 5% of 250,000 is 12,500 children. Died, disappeared, or arrested, with no systematic record of what happened to them, where they went, or who had been responsible for them. Here is the detail that the official histories tend to move past. Charles Loring Brace believed that poor Catholic immigrant children were genetically inferior. He wrote this. He described them as a stupid, foreign criminal class. He believed that removing them from their Catholic families and placing them in Protestant homes was an act of rescue, not just from poverty, but from their own faith. The Catholic Church understood exactly what was happening. One Catholic newspaper editor described the Children's Aid Society agents as prowling certain quarters of the city, talking with children in the streets, inviting and urging them to leave their friends and homes, picturing to them vistas of abundant food, clothes, and money. He called it the work of perversion. Catholic clergy accused the society of a deliberate pattern intended to break up immigrant Catholic families, of seizing children in the name of charity and of religion, and carrying them away to be brought up aliens to the Catholic faith. The church was not wrong. Brace's program was explicitly Protestant. The farms the children went to were Protestant farms. The values the children were raised with were Protestant values. Catholic children arrived as Irish or Italian. Many of them left the trains with new names, new religions, and in some cases new birth dates, because nobody had verified the information they arrived with. Some were renamed by the families who took them. Some had their ages changed in records. Some had siblings who were separated on different trains and never found each other again. The Children's Aid Society did not prioritize keeping siblings together. It prioritized placement. In October 1904, 40 Irish Catholic children from the New York Foundling Hospital arrived by train in Clifton, Arizona. They were between 1 and 6 years old. A Catholic priest named Father Mandan had arranged for them to be placed with Catholic families in the area. Most of those families were Mexican. When white Protestant residents of Clifton saw Irish children being handed to Mexican families, they formed a mob. 25 armed men went to the homes of the Mexican families that night and forcibly removed the children. When one adoptive father protested, the mob leader put a gun to his ribs. The Catholic Church sued. The case went to the Supreme Court of the United States. The court ruled in favor of the mob. The children stayed with the white families. Not one member of the mob was prosecuted. Around 3 million people alive today are descended from orphan train riders. Many of them do not know it. The records from the orphan train era are scattered across dozens of archives, partially digitized, inconsistently maintained. The Orphan Train Heritage Society of America, founded in 1986, has spent decades trying to reconstruct what the Children's Aid Society never properly tracked. The National Orphan Train Complex in Concordia, Kansas, holds what survives of the documentation. What survives is incomplete by design. The Society's agents were not historians. They were social workers operating under impossible caseloads with no systematic record-keeping requirement. Children were placed, and the paperwork moved on. Whether the child was well or ill-treated, whether the child stayed or ran, whether the child lived or died, these were questions the system was not structured to answer. A boy named John Jackson walked off a New York street at 5 years old and followed a marching band and never found his way home again. He ended up on a train. What happened to him after placement is not in the record. A girl named Lottie Stern was 14. the daughter of a rag picker, and ended up in circumstances the historical record describes only obliquely. What happened to her is not in the record. They are in the 5%. The program ended in 1929, not because of accountability, not because of investigation, not because the government reviewed what had happened to the 12,500 children who died, disappeared, or were arrested. It ended because the Midwest no longer needed farm labor. States had begun passing laws restricting the importation of out-of-state children without costly fees to ensure their own needy children took priority. The economic logic that had driven the program for 75 years had run out. There was no apology. There was no commission. There was no accounting for what had happened to the children the system lost. The Children's Aid Society, the organization Charles Loring Brace founded, still exists today. It is called Children's Aid. It has an annual budget of $100 million. It provides adoption and foster care services for disadvantaged New York City children. It is considered one of the oldest and most respected children's charities in the United States. The train stopped in 1929. The last one went to Texas. The unadopted children who were still on it when it arrived in Fort Worth were left for the city to deal with. Fort Worth had to figure it out. Nobody else did.